everybody, welcome to a new Q&A. It's been an extremely long time since I've recorded any sort of Q&A type draw with me style video on this channel. I think the last one was in 2019. However, I was recording a few of these on my Patreon, which are still available right now. If you like these, then you can find a few more on there. There's about 6 episodes. But yes, welcome. This is gonna be a pretty chill video, so feel free to pick up your sketchbook or your iPad or whatever else you use to draw and make some art alongside. So I'll be answering questions today from Instagram. I asked for questions that would be related to my comic series, Kisses in June, but I also got a few questions about making a comic, and so I will answer those too. And I'll talk a little bit about what I'm working on in the background. This is the first time I'm doing a Q&A where I'm doing a voiceover instead of drawing at the same time. So today is the 21st of June and it's my character's birthday today. It's Kie's birthday, my protagonist. And I really wanted to do something a little bit special for this year, especially because of the launch of the comic. And I think from this point forward, I will just make June a very special month for me to kind of like take stock and to also just kind of celebrate how far I've come and to enjoy how far the comic's coming along and just to kind of reflect and to be grateful for this journey in itself. I'm feeling so satisfied working on this comic. It's that feeling you get when you are working towards something and feeling like you're building something. And it's not really about reaching an end goal or an external outcome. It's all about the process. And I just want to be able to continue being in that space, in that headspace. Obviously, there are moments of doubt and there are moments of difficulty. However, I try my best to remind myself about the journey and to remind myself that the work is the reward. That is kind of my mantra for this whole project. And it's definitely been getting me through some of the harder times. And when I push through to the other side, it really does have that soul affirming type of effect. Obviously, I do hope that I'll be able to sustain myself with this project, but all in good time. I keep reminding myself to have patience, and this has gotten very deep very fast. I did not intend for that, but that's just my tendency as my personality type, so I try not to fight that too much these days. But yes, I'm going to get into answering these questions now. I won't talk so much about the process of this illustration. I think it's fairly straightforward, but maybe in the future I can talk more about my process and the steps, because I don't think that's something I've really done before, especially not on YouTube. So here we go. Okay, so the first question is from Kie. What made the style for Kisses in June click for you? So I suppose only the prologue is out right now, which you can read on my website. And the style is I'd say the style is quite consistent within that prologue. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's gonna be like that going forward, or that it's gonna stay consistent and that I arrived at a final result that I wanted. It's more, for me, I see this whole project as an experiment almost, or like something I can do, something I can use to channel my own expression and also to evolve my skills. And so it's definitely gonna be changing throughout. But for the prologue itself, what made it click? I mean, I got some help. I asked for some feedback from some friends and they helped me quite a lot with certain elements that weren't working and gave me a lot of good advice. So I incorporated some of that and was able to arrive at a place where I felt like the backgrounds and the colors were really working together. And so I just continued that look throughout the prologue, and I will still use elements from what I'd learned, but I think I will continue to push the quality of it. I do want to make the comic as good as I can make it, but I also know there's like an element of time as well. So I have to have a balance between quality and quantity. I'm working that out. So the next question is from Sinner, Gold Drop Sinner. What has been the most surprising thing for you while developing and creating your comic so far? The most surprising thing? I think one of the most surprising things was the writing process, because somehow it kind of all just came together on its own as long as I sat in my chair and put in the work. And I feel like writing is such a mysterious process, and I don't want to sound like I don't want to sound airy-fairy about it. And I know there's probably writers out there who are like, oh, what are you talking about? There's just a structure and you just fill in the gaps, blah, blah, blah. Which I can understand that, but there is some sort of magical element to when ideas come to you and channel through you. And also moments when you're able to connect story points together that you just had no idea how to do, or didn't even consider before, and it just kind of clicks one day when you wake up and you're like walking around minding your own business, and just all of a sudden you'll have like a burst of insight which will then be able to be translated into evolving the story and developing the story. And this is my first foray into writing, and so I did not have any expectation of what it would be like, but finding that out as part of the process it's been a surprise. It's been a delightful surprise in a good way. What are the more downsides? I mean, I think for this project, I've definitely managed my own expectations pretty well, I'd say. I knew it would be a lot of work. I knew that the things would take a long time. I knew that the way I was doing things is not necessarily very efficient. And I was gentle on myself because I know that this is my first time, and so I can't expect much of myself either. And so the surprises are not so much negative as they are positive. So this question, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce your username, but they're asking, how do you write the script for your comic? I'm trying to get started, but I'm not sure how I should go about it. So this is probably a difficult question to answer in this short type of Q&A style. I definitely would recommend looking into just screenwriting in general and story structure, just to get a good starting point. It's just like art. There's no right or wrong way of going about it. There's no first step. There's nothing like that you have to prepare for, really. I think a lot of our storytelling is innate and natural because it's built into how we perceive the world. Okay, so this is going to be really strange advice, but I think the thing that helped me the most is understanding the type of brain I have, or like the type of personality I have. And one of the things that helped me the most is learning about cognitive functions. That's part of Jungian personality types, like MBTI basically, but not just like the letters, it's the actual cognitive function stacks that we have depending on our personality type. So based on that, this also goes for art or anything else that you want to do in your life. I do think that having a basic understanding of this can be very helpful for certain types of people. It definitely helps me because I was always somebody who was quite frustrated with certain elements of how I would do particular things, because I would look at other people and not understand at all how it would be so simple and easy for them, but for me it would be so difficult. But after learning about cognitive functions, I've definitely come to realize that we just have different styles, and we're just fundamentally, we process information differently, the way we gather information is different too. And so because of that, I now am able to like embrace my strengths and just be compassionate towards my weaknesses, and just try and be cognizant of my weaknesses too, like, because they're also, you can be blindsided by those. And so yeah, circling back, for me personally, my mind works in a way where I see things in patterns and in webs. So it's very useful for me to make mind maps of stuff. It's useful for me to connect things in that way and have like an overall picture. And so I like to write in a way where I can connect a lot of things and create patterns. Or I'm not really creating them, because I actually believe that you almost discover your story by digging a lot. And so you discover these patterns over time. And this part of story writing it can be developed, or it can be something that you can either do it like a lot of it, or you can do like none at all. It just essentially depends on what your interest is and which area you enjoy the most. And then from the foundation of what you've built there, you can then find a plot within that story, within that web, to then bring into like a narrative story structure. So I do recommend learning about story structure, because that will inform the plot points that you pick. I wouldn't say my process was very linear. It was a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of just fumbling around, trying to find a method that works for me. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Try and find as many helpful resources as you can. Not every resource will speak to you, not every resource will be useful. And then maybe you'll stumble across a resource that makes sense to your brain, that your particular brain, which cognitive functions you have. And then all of a sudden it clicks and you're like, oh, okay, I know where to start now. But yes, it's all a very individual journey, and that was my process. My process was also diving into the character's core wounds and seeing where those originated from, and then how that shapes them as a person. And it's just like real life, I suppose, in that way. Honestly, I like to see my character arcs as like how my characters change their attachment styles. Next question is from CHCKR board. What part of the story did you struggle the most to write, and how did you decide how to start the story? I suppose this is similar to the previous question. This is the thing, I wrote my story with the ending in mind already from the get-go. I had kind of like a timeline of, oh gosh, sorry if you can hear a dog barking. That dog's been so annoying. This dog has been barking so much, like so much, mostly at night time at like 11 p.m, which is fun. So with Kisses in June specifically, I knew that it's a story about Jun and Kie. That is the main concept. It's about their dynamic. And I also had an idea of the style I wanted to write the story in, which I won't reveal too much about because I want readers to kind of find that out as they're reading. And then thirdly, I already had essentially how the relationship changes across time. I had that all kind of in the back of my mind already. Those general elements stayed pretty much the same, I'd say. Actually, thinking back, I think I had the start already planned as well, or where I would start the story. I just think these types of things you work out as you go. You just really got to have faith in that process. It's the same with art. There's that faith element of like, trust the process, and you'll get there. But one thing I'd say is that I definitely gravitated towards resources that were centered around screenwriting. Because in my mind, I felt like writing for a comic, at least for what I was going for, would be more similar to writing a screenplay than it would be to writing a novel. So that was the direction I decided to take. And because I obviously have my own preferences when it comes to stories and movies, I was able to know the type of style, or at least try to kind of go in the direction of the types of movies and visual media that I enjoy. So with your question, I'd say the hardest part of writing the story was to fix certain problems in the story, like certain elements where I knew that things had to connect where they just were not looking like they would. And that's why writing is a very long process, I believe. It takes time for your subconscious to work through those problems and to one day give you the solution. And yeah, there's a lot of patience involved in that, and being able to continue working and not fixate too much. But that was probably one of the harder parts of writing. I've got to admit though, the writing process, I only really look back on my writing process in a fond way, because I knew that, like I said before, I think I managed my expectations pretty well, so I didn't get too frustrated. But it was a struggle. I wouldn't say that it was easy all the time, but I definitely took it in my stride. And how did you decide to start your story? How did I decide to start? Because writing is such a chaotic process, it's hard for me to pinpoint when exactly I had the start of my story. I feel like I had the start and the end already set in stone from the beginning, almost. Actually, the starting scene has changed a lot, but the elements are there. The elements are still there. So I remember drawing that scene way before I even finished the script. So I definitely already had that in place, and the ending has been there since forever. So yeah, pretty much from the get-go, I'd say. The next question is from Charlie Bergerot. They're asking, would you ever do a Jun plushie or a Kie restock? So for those who don't know, back in 2019, I created a plushie of Kie, and he was like a one-off thing at the time because it was very expensive to create plushies, and I just wanted to try it out because it was my first time doing a project like that. And oh my god, it actually burnt me out. I don't know if I've spoken about this on the vlog, but that project really burnt me out for a very long time, and I only really recognized that the year after, when I was trying to start recovering and healing from it. I'm much more resilient now, and I feel like because I now know what to expect, I do definitely want to make Jun at some point, for sure. If not, then a Kie restock is possible too. I still have some C grade plushies that I'm going to put up at some point, but yeah, the plushie stuff is like not too high on my priority list right now, unfortunately. But we'll see by volume 3 if things pan out, how I'm feeling, and if there's interest, then yes, I definitely do want to make him eventually. Okay, next question. So next question is from Aru Kusat. Your name's like my auntie's name. So how did you choose their names? I think they're talking about Jun and Kie, right? So Kie's full name is Kieran and his surname is Wan. And I actually can't remember how I picked his name. Honestly, I definitely named him as soon as I made him. And he's Block's brother who precedes him in terms of when he was created. So I made Block in 2014, I made Kie in 2018, and I made Jun in 2019. Jun was definitely made to kind of accompany Kie. I did have an idea of like his character, but he definitely evolved from Kie having to have like some sort of counterpart. And his name came from a list of names I had written down on my name. I have like a note where I write out names that I like. I tend to go for sound over anything else. I had Juno written down for a long time, and a little bit of a spoiler, but he's got if you don't want spoilers, just mute me now, but he has a stage name which is Juno. And Juno was a name that I had written down for like a really long time So I was kind of playing around with that, and like the idea of him being called Jun and then like his like second part of his name being O, but I changed it in the end to Junsu. Yeah, so I wouldn't say I have a process. I sometimes, actually when I was writing the comic itself, because I do have different types of characters with different backgrounds in my story, I wanted to make sure I wasn't like messing up too much, so I ended up using some, like doing research and looking at like baby names and things like that. Okay, so the next question is from Tisha. Any tips for drawing faster / less perfectionism, especially for comics? I think my answer is going to be a little bit counterintuitive, but it's based on my own experience. So take it with a pinch of salt. Take every answer with a pinch of salt, obviously. But I feel as though drawing faster is a side effect of drawing accurately and slowly for a long period of time, to the point where you've drawn so much that it becomes almost second nature to you. I definitely fall into a habit of drawing too quickly, and it makes my work suffer, or it makes the process a little bit more chaotic, which I don't mind at times, honestly. Like I feel like sometimes that adds to the outcome, and that's also part of my tempo and rhythm. But I don't know if I would recommend it to other people, because there are bad habits that I pick up because of that, and I have to backtrack on myself oftentimes just to iron out those habits I picked up from drawing too quickly for too long. So I think drawing smart, not drawing quickly, is probably more important, because you save time overall. If you learn the foundations and they're ingrained and marinated into your subconscious mind, then I think at some point you'll be able to create enough shorthands for yourself to then be able to draw quickly. But I would not really recommend to try and draw quickly from the start or the get-go. And you talked about perfectionism too, which I do think is slightly related, but not quite related. Perfectionism is a strange one, because on one hand, as an artist, you almost need it to push yourself into a new direction, or to evolve your work and to pick out your mistakes so that you can then fix them and get closer to what you're looking for. But on the other hand, I can see how it can be paralyzing to the point where you're unhappy with your work and dissatisfied, and wish that you could just let that feeling go and then just be free. I do believe perfectionism manifests in different ways depending on the individual. So it would be difficult for me to give you advice, like specific helpful advice, but if you're talking about just within a comic book, then I can relate to that. I think that's somewhat universal, because when you are creating a comic, not every single panel is going to be to the highest of your standards, and it's almost inevitable because you're working against deadlines, and you need to move the story. What is important is telling the story and moving it forward. And I almost embrace the wonkiness of the different panels and how off-model my characters look at times, because I think it gives more emotion and potentially more variety to how the comic looks. It just feels more alive to me, and there's a certain uniqueness that you get by drawing each panel yourself, and without relying on 3D models either. Because I could actually say, oh, you could use a 3D model to I don't know, make your character more on model, and that would save you time and you wouldn't have to stress as much. But for me personally, I quite like it when characters are drawn differently in each panel. Sometimes you need a different type of, like, you need to stretch and squash and change almost the demeanor of your character to fit the action, the story beat. And so I feel as though making pretty drawings is not really the goal of a comic, and reminding yourself that it's not as important as you think it is, because people are literally gonna read that panel in less than a second, so you don't have to worry about the details too much. And I also think it's helpful to pick out the panels which you know that you will try your best on and that you'll make as beautiful as possible or as technically correct as possible, etc. Because those are your impact shots where the reader will tend to pause a bit more on that beat. And you can then kind of like save your energy and be a bit more smart that way. So you can quickly go through certain panels that move the story forward and then spend more time on those particular impact shots. So the next question is from sorry, I cannot pronounce your name, Septimis. The question is there any kind of OC you really wanted to create but never did, like in a different universe? For example, fantasy, etc. I don't know. I think perhaps in the past maybe, but for now I can't really think of any that cross my mind right now. So Kisses in June is a drama / slice of life, which is more or less grounded in the real world, minus about 10 years. Well, mine is about 15 years, so it's relatively modern and relatable in that sense. However, I do have another story which is more fantasy / magical. I have characters that feature in both of these series, and so it doesn't really feel like to me that I have other OCs that I want to create, because I've already kind of satisfied my itch for like drawing like something in a different genre. I also tend to gravitate more to everyday life types of stories. I like slow stories. I like things that are based in reality. I tend to actually consume a lot of non-fiction over fiction. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have an inclination towards other types of genres. Yeah, not right now. I'm sure there will be instances in the future. Okay, so next question. Do you have songs that you associate with your characters? This is from Saifoku. Yeah, I do. I have a playlist, or I have a few playlists for my OCs. I haven't really updated them in a while. I have playlists for Jun Kie, and I have a playlist for Block and Brick. I have a playlist for Block. I have a Kids in June playlist. I have a Ebony playlist as well. So I have a few. I want to share the playlists at some point and have them as like part of a zine, but that's for the future. So I found out that Instagram has like a music option for your profile now, and so I jumped on that. I added a song on my comic Instagram that is from my Kisses in June playlist. I will periodically update that song every now and then, so you can find out what inspires me. Next question is by Caillou Eddie. Do you associate animals with your OCs? If yes, what are they? Kind of. So Brick is a rabbit or a bunny. Block is a cat or a kitten. Well, not a kitten. he's a grumpy old cat. And Jun is, I guess he's like a wolf or a big dog. Like I haven't really specified, but he has like pointy ears, so I guess he's more like, I kind of thought about him as like maybe like a wolf or a husky. And then Kie is more like a puppy dog. He's like a dog with the floppy ears. There's not a specific breed, like I don't know too much about dog breeds, but a dog with floppy ears. I like to draw them as those variations from time to time. Yeah, it's becoming more of a consistent theme, I feel, especially with my merchandise. So it also features a little bit in the comics, so I guess maybe not kind of, I definitely do associate them. It's more of an aesthetic thing though. I think I'm gonna wrap this up soon. I actually have more questions, but I have to go in about 15 minutes. So the last question is from Melmar Art. How do you go about world building around your OCs? So I like how you worded this question, because I definitely approach world building in a way where it supports the characters, so that the way that my characters are shape how the world is, but I guess it's a somewhat back and forth process. I definitely had some ideas in place, very specific ideas for like where they live, and there's a particular city as well that has a specific dynamic that I incorporated into the story. And then I also had a different story of mine that I had for an extremely long time. So it's a story that I made maybe over 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and I had these 3 OCs called Maru, Roha and Nao, and they have their own kind of world. They had this integral device that would be used within their world, and I was able to incorporate that element too into my story. So I feel like world building is like this organic process of like many ideas just coming together into one, and the more you learn about our world as well, and like our life here and our history, I think also that helps you create a fictional world in a more realistic way, or a more like believable way. It doesn't have to be realistic. Yeah, and also Kisses in June is related to my main story, which I talk about sometimes, which doesn't actually have a name yet. Probably should give it some sort of code name for now, just so it's easier to refer to. But that story has its own world too, and so I had to be cognizant of how they connect. And oftentimes it's like, oh, I want this to occur in between my characters or in the plot, and then how would I justify that action or that scene within a larger context? Like, why would that scene come about in the first place? And then I go into a rabbit hole of like web building and like building patterns. So just so I can justify this like one scene that I wanted to write. So yeah, that tends to be my process. It's a very back and forth, chaotic, ordering the chaos type of situation. Okay, so I'm gonna end things here. Thank you for listening to me ramble on. I hope this video was fun. Like, I hope this video was insightful for you. I think it's a little bit different. I haven't talked too much about my process in that much depth before, so I'm not super familiar as well with how I should explain things. I hope it was okay. I hope it helped you in some way, or that you just enjoyed drawing along and having some company. Oh, if you do want to read the comic, you can read it on my website at kissesinjune.com for free. There's also a physical copy that should be available on my shop as well, trickiewagon.net or trickiewagon.shop. So I want to say a big thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.